You're listening to TFM.
Want to join in the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode? Join the Babel Conference, our listeners' discussion group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field, and we'll look forward to seeing you there.
Hey everyone, I'm Rod Roddenberry, and you're listening to Trek FM.
Are you taking all these books? I thought I'd take some light reading. Guess I got bored.
Hello and welcome to TFM's local books and comic show for Star Trek, and I'm just one of the hosts here, Matthew Rushing, and I'm so excited that we've got back both Casey and Jonathan because we have a monster show for everybody.
A monster. I don't know.
Although, ironically, I don't think there's any monsters in the book.
I don't think there is, no.
Will we call those like big rhinoceros-sized spider things that chase Seven around like monsters?
True. Sure.
Like, the monstrous, right? And I mean, come on, the evil dude in the book is quite
he's
monstrous.
A monster.
Well, he's a monster.
He's a monster.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Oh, goodness. Well,
man.
it's great to be back here, and I'm very excited that we have some book news. And so, Casey, you actually put this on the outline. So first, we've got a brand new book here coming out in the Strange New Worlds era with Una McCormack.
Yep, we've got in September 2024, September 24th, 2024, we've got Strange New Worlds Asylum by Una McCormack. And so it's great to get a new Strange New Worlds book before we, since we don't really know when we're going to get a new season of that yet. But this one takes place, or part of it takes place kind of a little bit further back in time. And I'll read the blurb here for us so that we all get even more excited. When Una Chin Riley and Christopher Pike meet at Starfleet Academy after one of his lectures, they immediately become friends. A stellar student, Una is the poster girl of her class, and Pike is determined to become a Starfleet captain with his own ship, rhetorically assembling his dream crew. As their friendship evolves, Pike also suspects Una is involved with a Yuksana, a Chionian cultural minority, who are seeking asylum in Federation space, leading to more questions than answers. 25 years later, Una and Pike are working together on the USS Enterprise to settle a Chionian trade agreement when a pro-Yuksana saboteur launches a terrorist attack. When the suspect is taken into custody for interrogation and it's discovered to have a history with Una, her past associations resurface, threatening to expose a secret she's been harboring all these years.
Bum, bum, bum.
Bum, bum, bum. So kind of got some Illyrian kind of vibes there, maybe. Like,
yeah,
maybe that past is going to come in. But yeah, very much looking forward to anything by Una McCormack, to be honest. But
and I believe this will be her first time writing for the character of Una.
I think you're right.
That's pretty
that
cool.
She's named the namesake.
How many secrets can Una have?
It's
I mean, the character,
potential.
not Una McCormack, who I'm sure is full of secrets.
Yes.
But
that's gonna be so hard to talk about when it comes out to differentiating between the two of them. We're gonna have to just call her number one the whole
number
time.
one. Wait, are we calling Una McCormack number one?
I mean, she is kind of number one in our hearts, right?
So. Yes.
Well, Jonathan, we also have a Picard book news. And so what's coming out there in November?
So this is actually a printing of an audio drama. The printing script. The audio drama was Picard No Man's Land, which was by Kirsten Beyer and Mike Johnson, which released back in, I want to say, March of 2022. Somewhere in 2022.
Something like that.
And it was for a long time just the audio drama, and I believe they got the actual actors from the series to do the audio for it. Before it was just the audio, but now we're getting the actual print script. So it is in script form, so it doesn't read like a novel, but it is the script of the thing. So it's good for those of us who can't, or rather, like me, won't or listen to audio stuff like that. We can actually read the physical copy now.
And for the collectors in us, there's something to put up on our shelves now.
Yes.
Although the problem is it's a Picard book, but it's going to be only in paperback, so it's not going to fit with the other Picard hardcovers.
Lame. Because in Star Wars, they do the printings of the audio dramas, but in hardcover. So I'm kind of surprised that they're not doing the same thing, but I guess it's probably because of cost. And it's
just 112 pages. It's really short. Like even the Star Wars ones are pretty short. You can read them in like a couple hours, but this one is even shorter than that. So it probably just for sure was not worth the price tag it would put, because it's already like $15 or $14 in paperback. It would probably be around $20 if they had to do hardcover, and that'd just be too much.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. So, no, I think it's exciting that we're getting both of these kind of things coming out. And of course, we've got Dayton Ward's book as well as Greg Cox's book coming out this year. So it's nice to see that we're at least getting some movement on Star Trek. I think it is going to be kind of fascinating because, Discovery is ending. Season 3 of Strange New Worlds is filming now. Picard is over, and they have still not announced Star Trek Legacy, which to their detriment and their stupidity. Yes, that's right. I said stupidity. And so I don't really know exactly what they're going to do. We've gotten more Star Trek books, but we're still in this place where, we're getting maybe 3, if you're lucky, 4 a year. So I don't know. And it seems to be all based on what and possibly they might be doing with Star Trek in general when it comes to screen. And so with 2 of the shows ending and then 1 still going, it makes me wonder what they're going to do with Star Trek in general. Because it seems like there had been a resurgence, and no, I don't mean the video game and or comic series based off of it, of Star Trek, but it also seems like maybe is Star Trek dying? I don't know.
Bite your tongue.
I mean, let's just say, again, if they're smart, right? They're doing Star Trek Legacy.
Yeah.
I will say, if we're looking at it on a positive side, in 2022, we only got 2 novels produced. In 2023, we only got 2. In 2024, we're getting 4. So if you look at it that way, we're getting double the amount that we got last year. So
this is true.
Hopefully, I'm hoping that this is a trajectory upwards for future years, and that it doesn't stagnate or go down again.
And they're waiting longer before they announce them too. I mean, we just got the announcement, here in February, it might have been in January, about a book coming out in September. I mean, that's not a huge runway of time, and so, and hopefully they stay on the schedule, because I know in the past some of the books, I think it was
High Country. Was one of them
High Country,
pushed.
like there were some delays in some of the books, so they kind of ended up in the following year. So I think we were supposed to have 3 books one year, and actually Firewall that we're going to be talking about today might have been one. I think it was originally supposed to be released in November.
It was February from when the first announcement.
Well, then there was another book in the past, some other time.
Yeah. Well, a lot of things, Casey, you're right. I mean, a lot of things ended up getting delayed because of all the stuff that happened with COVID. And then, you had
the printing
supply chain issues with the printings and everything. So, yes, a lot of stuff ended up getting delayed. And then of course, a lot of stuff ended up getting delayed just because they didn't quite know exactly what I think they were doing with Star Trek. I mean, gosh, how many years did it take for us to get the Kelvinverse timeline novels that finally came out? So I mean, it's been a lot. So hopefully, I think we're all hoping we'll get more novels, but thankfully we still have plenty of novels to be able to cover. But even more importantly, I'm so excited that waiting in the wings here to talk about his brand new book, Firewall, is David Mack. So guys, I think we should stop just, chewing the fat and head on over and talk to David. Well, we are so excited to be back here with a brand new book which means we've got one of the authors with us. And as always, and David, nobody can see this, but he's showing us the book right now. David, it is so good, one, to have you back in Literary Treks, and of course, to celebrate the brand new book, Star Trek Picard Firewall.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be here.
Awesome, man. Awesome. So, well, first, this is something I totally forgot to even put on the outline, but I'm always really interested the background information of just kind of where the genesis of this story and kind of filling in the storyline for 7 and 9 kind of came from.
Well, it originated with a simple request from my editors. Tell the story of how, when, and why 7 joined the Fenris Rangers. And as for the details, how it all came together, it started with going through all of the material established about this in the canon. And there's very little. It's just a few lines of dialogue here and there, and it requires a bit of parsing, a bit of creative interpretation. At one point, 7 talks about how, she tried to get into Starfleet. She was rebuffed, her application to the Academy rejected, that Admiral Janeway put her career on the line to try and get her in, and that failed. And then finally, 7 just got fed up with it. And as she puts it, at that point, I went full Ranger. And the way she phrased it, and that was, I believe, in a season 3 episode, season 2 or season 3 episode, as she's explaining this to somebody, it makes it sound very clearly like it was a cause and effect. Because of this. I did this because this was done to me. And it seemed to me that these are the sort of things that would have happened very soon after Voyager's return from the Delta Quadrant. It's not the sort of thing where you're going to wait 6, 7, 8 years to sort this out. This is all going to happen within a very short span of time after Voyager comes home. And so that was how I chose the time period for the main body of the book, which is mostly set in 2381. And there's a little bit of a preamble before that in 2380. There's a framing sequence set in 2386, which shows 7 as a Ranger in an environment and in a sort of a state of mind that's maybe a little more familiar to the readers. If they've seen Picard, then the version of 7 as a Ranger that they'll see in the first and last chapter, the framing sequence of the book, that'll be very familiar. And that sequence, those 2 chapters, are there to ground the book in the version of Picard that viewers are familiar with, because then we're going back in time about 20 years to basically what is a sequel to Voyager, to the Voyager Endgame finale. And that's where we're sort of picking up is, what happened after Voyager came home and how did that drive 7 to join the Rangers?
One of the big things about this is, and this is so interesting, I think, for all of you writers now, you'd spent so much time in a universe you guys got to create. And now we're writing in the continuation of TNG, but in the Picard timeline, which is very different than the one that got set up. And so I'd love to hear just about the difference of writing in the Picard timeline, because a lot of things are very different, especially with the approach to the Federation and Starfleet. In many ways, it is, what people called Deep Space Nine, which is darker, grittier, and sometimes it seems a little bit less hopeful than the universe that we had spent a lot of time in previously, known as, the Litverse.
I would agree with that. I think the vision that we see of the Federation and Starfleet and the people who constitute all of that in Picard, we have a much more cynical view of them in Picard than I think we did in TNG. Part of that, I think, can be blamed on the events of Deep Space Nine. The Dominion War certainly made Federation society a lot more callous. But I think then it also made them a tad more paranoid. And what then ramped that up was the events in the movie First Contact, which is set in 2373, where the Borg pretty much walked right up to Earth and knocked. And, the people of Earth don't remember it, but, the Borg sent a little, sphere back in time and assimilated Earth and wiped out the Federation. The Enterprise crew managed to fix it, sure, but by a sea hair. So the people of Earth are a little bit shell shocked, and they are certainly going to have had their nativist tendencies triggered. They've had their tribalism triggered, which is why, for instance, with the Synth Rebellion that you're going to see in 2386 after the events on Mars, or I can't remember if that was 2384 or 2385, but somewhere in there's going to be this whole mess on Mars. And the people of Earth are just ready to write off synths, ready to write off synthetic artificial, life forms entirely. It's a remarkably callous thing to do. So I was working with that mindset. The people of Earth are sort of in this kind of a mindset. So when Voyager comes home and Seven is reintroduced into human society, they don't want really much to do with her. They don't trust her. They don't like her. When they look at her, they see a Borg. This is a culture that has been traumatized by the Borg. And because of Janeway destroying the Borg warp network, they have every reason to think that the Borg are on the warpath against them. And suddenly Janeway shows up with this ex-Borg who still has significant Borg implants, a lot of Borg tech inside her body, including nanoprobes, which can do all kinds of crazy stuff. Not to mention a record of disciplinary problems aboard Voyager, including attempts to seize control of the ship by force on more than one occasion. None of this looks good to Starfleet. Doesn't matter how many times Janeway tries to put a nice bow on it and say, yeah, well, she's better now. That's not going to fly. What Starfleet Command is seeing and what the Federation government is seeing is a major potential security risk. How do you know she hasn't just been infiltrating Voyager, developing social skills that will let her walk into Starfleet Command and assimilate all of our tech right from the source? How do we know that, this is not the beginning of a stealth infiltration? They don't. And because of the events of First Contact, they're very paranoid about this. So Seven gets basically hit with a lot of racism, a lot of fear. And it doesn't help that she's chosen to keep her Borg designation, 7 of 9, because here they are, she's been legally dead 25 years at this point. So they're trying to resurrect her as Annika Hansen. And now they have her saying, well, I don't want these papers. I'm 7 of 9. And the Federation is saying, well, according to our records, you're Annika Hansen. And so they're basically dead naming her. And they're refusing to respect the identity that she has chosen for herself. And between that and the racism and the fear she's going to be getting and dealing with every day from every person she meets and interacts with on Earth, including her own Aunt Irene, who's trying her best to welcome her home, but flinches every time Seven hugs her because the implants touch Irene's face. There's nobody here to welcome her. And all of her friends on Voyager are gone. Everybody's scattered when they came home. Janeway's the only one who's still around, and she's busy at Starfleet Command. Her relationship with Chakotay fell apart because he got promoted to take command of the Protostar, which is a major classified top secret project that they can't let her anywhere near. They can't even tell her the name of it. And this breeds all kinds of envy and resentment and just poisons their relationship. Tom and B'Elanna go off to have their kid. Harry Kim finally gets promoted and goes to another ship. Tuvok goes into Starfleet security. Everybody's gone. The Doctor's off on his speaking tour for holographic sentient rights. So the whole the whole emotional support network that Seven has relied on for years on Voyager is suddenly gone at the moment she needs it most. And she's alone. And she's in a culture that she was told would welcome her, and it doesn't. She's on a planet she was told she'd recognize as home. She doesn't. She feels alone. She feels isolated, persecuted. And although she says that what she's worried about is, all these efforts that Janeway is making on her behalf, she doesn't want Janeway to trash her career on her behalf. What Seven is really dealing with is the fact that she's feeling humiliated. she's feeling embarrassed. And the longer this goes on and the more Janeway tries to help her, the more humiliated Seven becomes at the fact that she's unhelpable and that it's tarnishing the reputation of her dear friend. So her need to get out, although she says it's about protecting Janeway's rep, it's really just because there's only so much humiliation and degradation a person can be expected to take before they say, screw you, I'm leaving.
Well, Seven's not someone, she was kind of almost like a Vulcan character for us when we were on Voyager, and we saw more of her humanity start to come out as the seasons went on that show. But by the time the show ended, she was still very much, kind of her Borg-like self in a lot of ways. But by the time we get to see her in Picard, she's very much changed. She's very much more in tune with her emotions. And we got to see that in this story too. She, because of all the things you were just talking about, like she takes a pretty fast journey to become kind of jaded herself and, like you said, embarrassed, and it just her not even finding her place in this world. She's actually back to where she was when she was taken out of the collective. Just wondering if you could talk about kind of bringing those emotions out of Seven kind of more than we really saw, at that point in Voyager when she would have been returning to Earth.
Well, in that sense, Firewall is a coming of age story for Seven. It's basically the story of a woman who, although she's physically an adult, 32 years old, she's lost all of the years of socialization that she should have had. Her childhood, her adolescence, and her young adulthood were all stolen from her by the Borg. And she really only had about 4 years to kind of get socialized and reacclimated to human society by the crew of Voyager before they reintroduced her to Earth, and then suddenly everything they told her went out the window. So when she gets out of there, what she's realizing is she can never be the best version of herself if she stays on Earth. The people here won't let her be the best version of herself. She's always going to be carrying around the baggage of everybody else's prejudice, everybody else's fear. Everyone's going to sort of dump all this stuff onto her, whether she wants it or deserves it or not. So she's got to get out of there. And like many people do, she's prone to sort of seek out environments and situations that at first feel familiar, that are comforting to her on some level, even if she doesn't fully understand why, which is why she finds herself, like a year later, working a menial job at the ass end of an assembly line in a mostly automated factory that even she realizes feels a lot like being back inside a Borg cube. And it's because there is, for her, a strange comfort in being anonymous, being hidden, being back out of sight, surrounded by beautifully running machinery that doesn't ask questions and doesn't have complicated emotions. This is a safe space for her. This is where she retreats to. And her social life is very much run the same way. She's yearning for contact, yearning for intimacy, trying to find a place where she'll be accepted, someone who will accept her for her, but she doesn't know how to get there. She, at one point in the book, likens it to, like, for instance, likens the flirtation that's going around her in a bar as everybody else is speaking a language that she has never been taught. And she's trying to pick it up from context, but she just can't. She's got half of it. She's got the vocabulary, but she doesn't have the syntax. She can't quite put it together. But she finds solace in strange places, like in the mosh pit. This is a place where she feels, oddly enough, safe, accepted, because she's here with all the other freaks, the other outcasts, the other sort of people who are existing in the liminal areas of society. And at this point, her entire identity is liminal, which basically means transitional. She's in a transitional state between who she was before and who she wants to become. And part of what she's also dealing with is the struggle between what she wants or thinks she wants and trying to figure out what it is she actually needs. She's pursuing what she thinks she wants, which is a place in Starfleet, her Federation citizenship recognized. This is what she thinks she wants. What she doesn't realize is that what she really needs is to find a place where she is accepted as herself, where she can basically be wanted, be needed, be welcomed by people who are not going to judge her. She needs a newfound family. And again, like most people, either you hated the family you grew up with, and so unconsciously or consciously you seek to create a different family unit when you grow up, or you like the family unit that you had for the most part when you were young, and in some way, again, consciously or unconsciously, you seek to replicate it as an adult. In this case, Seven tries to replicate it. She doesn't realize that's what she's doing, but once she winds up with the Rangers, pretty much from the moment she meets Ranger Keon Harper, she begins rebuilding her found family. Instead of a surrogate mother figure like she had in Janeway, she now has a surrogate father figure in Harper. Instead of the crew of the Voyager as her brothers and sisters, now she has the other Rangers. And most importantly, something she didn't really find on Voyager, partly because she wasn't ready. Once she joins the Rangers, she also meets the first great love of her life, which is Ellery Cade. So basically, her life starts coming together. She's found this sort of group of happy Robin Hood-style misfit law enforcement agents out on the edge of Federation space, out by the Romulan neutral zone, who are doing a job nobody else seems to want to do. And suddenly she's with her people. She's with people who are interested in justice, in fighting the bad guys, even if you have to use unconventional means to do it. She's found people who are ready to accept her for her. And she realizes eventually that that's what she needed all along. So that's where she's going. And what's happening, as you pointed out with your question, this change in her ability to feel and express emotion, her ability to empathize with others, to have an emotional theory of mind of other people. This is beginning to open up for her. She's working on it. She's trying to get there. But part of what she's grappling with is that she's holding herself back because of emotions like fear, guilt, over what she was used to do as a Borg drone. And the point where it all breaks, what breaks the dam, is when Ellery Cade brings her to the scene of the mass grave. Spoiler alert, by the way. But essentially, she has seen all that Seven, we've already seen this in Voyager. She hates injustice. She hates seeing bullies, hurt the weak. It pisses her off. There's a very deep-seated need for justice in her. And when she sees the injustice happening on Soroya, it really sort of brings to the fore her desire to fight against it. But she doesn't understand the true scope of it. So that's why Ellery shows it to her. And this is the moment where, confronted with this gorge, this dry riverbed, essentially, that for kilometers along is filled with the desiccated corpses and skeletons of 80,000 people murdered by the warlord Kogish. And they've just been left out in the sun to bleach and turn to dust. This is the moment that breaks the barrier between her and her human empathy. And it breaks it all at once at like the worst possible moment. This is essentially like going to the scene of a Nazi concentration camp, and that's where you learn what empathy feels like. What a moment to learn that. And it's one of those things where, she collapses to her knees, her hands sort of fall onto the bones that crumble to dust underneath. And now she's got this greasy, dusty ash all over her hands, like blood. And it's like this thing where she suddenly has to confront who and what she is and what she was used to do. She has to ask herself, is this the kind of monster that I was? Is this what I am? And she's grappling with this. And then, the empathy just starts to come in waves, and it grows exponentially. She empathizes with the one life in front of her taken and realizing this one life is as complex as mine, and now it's snuffed out. But if that's true of the one, then it's true of 10. But that means it's true of 100, 1,000, 1,000,000, and it all hits her. And that's when basically, the great Hoover Dam that holds back Seven from her emotions, that has separated her from her emotions for years, just comes down. it just disintegrates. And it's lucky for her that Ellery Cade is there to basically help her out of a panic attack, to walk her back from hyperventilating, to calm her down before she, panics herself into a freaking cardiac arrest. But this is the moment where Seven's life changes, and she finds her mission, which is the bastards who did this, who snuffed out all these beautiful lives. I'm going to hunt this son of a bitch down. This is the moment she finds purpose. She finds meaning in her life. She's got a direction now, and she's got people who are willing to help her get there. This is the beginning of her journey.
You talked about how there's basically two families, the old family with Voyager and the new family with the Rangers. And with her old family, you mentioned, they're all scattered around, but there is one member of her old family that we do get a little bit of in the book, and that's Janeway. And I really liked it because Janeway felt like an anchor in the story, that you get to see the Starfleet perspective, which is the traditional Star Trek perspective. And so she was able to, even though she's not throughout the book, she's in it enough that you see how Starfleet is handling things. So was that always in the plan for the novel, or was that something that came out when you needed that anchor for it?
It was always part of the plan. I knew from the moment I went into this that while it was primarily going to be about Seven, you can't tell this kind of story about Seven without Janeway. Janeway is, in many ways, not just her mentor, but a surrogate mother figure. She is Seven's anchor in this world. Janeway is the reason that Seven was given a chance. The whole reason Seven wasn't written off and just pushed out an airlock is because Janeway believed in her. Janeway was ready to stake everything on, I think it doesn't matter that she's been a Borg drone for over 18 years. I think she can come back. I think we can help her find her way back to humanity. And I'm willing to gamble everything on it. And that gamble very nearly, went wrong on a few occasions, but Janeway still did not give up. And by the time they're done, by the time they've made it home, and suddenly Starfleet and the Federation are in panic, racism mode, this is deeply upsetting to Janeway because she really believed that she was bringing Seven back to better opportunities, to a better future. And now suddenly, Starfleet and the Federation aren't living up to what she sold to Seven as a vision of the future. So I always planned on it being there, but then there's also the fact that what the story is also about is, again, this is a part of the classic structure of the Bildungsroman, the coming of age tale. The child character, in this case, Seven, has to break away from the parent. It's about the main character, going out into the world, defining themselves, finding their own moral code, their own approach to life, and at some point severing that bond of sort of connection or obedience to the parental figure, and saying, that's your way of living, it's not my way of living. And it's only when we do that on some level, maybe not quite this dramatic, but on some level we all go through this in the transition from adolescence to adulthood and independence. There's always going to be that moment where maybe your parents don't think you're quite doing the right thing, but they've realized they have to step back and let you go and let you do what you're going to do. And it's also a frightening moment, for a young adult to realize this is the moment when you're on your own. The moment you step out that door this time, you're going out to your life. And now suddenly you've got to find a job and a place to live, and you got to figure out how you're getting from place to place. And now you're responsible for every moment of your life and all of your actions. The whole period of being in the nest is gone. The safety net is gone. It's you and the universe now. Good luck. We've all been through that in some way. So I think that that's one of the more relatable aspects of the story. But that's what Seven has to go through. She's got to make this severance between her and Janeway, but she doesn't want to lose the love that's between them. She doesn't want to lose the emotional bond that they have, but they are coming to a fundamental problem where Seven sees value in the Fenris Rangers. She sees good in them, and she sees herself fitting in with them and wanting to remain part of them. And Janeway doesn't see the Rangers the same way. She's got a different ideological opinion of them because of how she was raised, because of what she believes in, and because of what she serves. And this becomes the main point of friction between her and Seven. And it really, in the end, comes down to, as you see at the end of the book, when the decision is irrevocably made, and Janeway says to Seven, I understand what you're saying, why you want to be there, but you've got to know I can't condone this. And that's when Seven has to turn it around and sort of reframe it for Janeway by saying, I don't need you to condone my actions. I just need you to trust me. And that's the moment when Janeway realizes, essentially, my little girl is all grown up. She has made her own way. She's made her own choice. She's asking me to trust her moral and ethical judgment and not substitute mine for it. And that's when she's able to realize, yes, that moment has come. And she says, always, always, Seven, I trust you. And it's symbolized at the end of the book, again, spoiler, when basically Janeway says, they're signing off, and Seven is, going to say, take care, Admiral. And she says, call me Catherine. And it's that moment where now they're on a first name basis. They're not in a hierarchical relationship anymore of, say, surrogate mother and surrogate child. They are now two adults on equal footing in the universe, both with agency and their own point of view, bonded by love, but also, operating out of mutual respect as equals. And that's the path of growth for their relationship in the book.
One of the things that I was thinking of too in the storyline that you have with Janeway is it really comes to represent as well, and it's not as much Janeway, of course, it's really Starfleet. It represents the way in which bureaucracy and politics really get in the way of our best ideals sometimes.
True.
I was really struck by that because I think it's a really poignant statement, and it's a very timeless statement, that we have to be so careful that what we really truly say we believe in and the things that we are at our best selves can get ameliorated and destroyed in a lot of ways when we get too wrapped up in things like politics and specifically bureaucracy, which we see a lot of that here in this book when it comes to especially the reaction to 7 of 9 and the reaction to this sector of space with everything that's going on with the Romulans and using it as an excuse to why we're not responsible for that anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there was a little bit of that sort of argument of what happens when the crisis du jour suddenly distracts, your attention. Suddenly you've put all your resources on this one problem, but to do that, you have finite resources. Putting them all here to deal with this emergent problem means that a lot of other areas that were depending on your help are now sort of left in the wind. They're left to twist because suddenly the NGOs and the indirect Starfleet support that was there sort of keeping, it was basically, that was the rusty wire that was holding in the cork, that was holding in just the frothy mess of chaos. Well, once that goes away, chaos is out and on the loose. And that's what happens in the Kira sector. Once the crisis on Romulus is understood to be what it is, and the scope of it is seen, suddenly everybody is shifting all their resources toward trying to deal with the crisis that's emerging on Romulus. But that means that places like the Kira sector, which are sort of in this nebulous, unclaimed frontier territory where the Federation, the Klingon Empire, and the Romulan Star Empire and the Romulan Neutral Zone all sort of meet in this one little area of slightly unclaimed, unmarked space near the Azure Nebula. And this is basically, it's like a weird no man's land.
It's like the Bermuda Triangle.
A little bit.
Things just get lost.
Except ships don't just vanish. It's more like the tri-border area where Brazil, I believe Paraguay, and I think it's Argentina meet. I think those are the three countries. I'd have to double check. But there's this area in South America known as the tri-border, and it's a remarkably politically unstable place. It's dangerous. It's known for black marketeers, smuggling, human trafficking. All kinds of crazy shit happens out there. And it's because it's this weird nexus point where three borders of three different countries meet, and it happens to be so remote from everything else that policing it is damn hard. Well, that's what's going on in the Kira sector. And the fact that Starfleet and the civilian organizations that the Federation was willing to sort of, support in their missions out there, once all that help gets taken away, these people are just basically left to screw themselves. They're like, you've taken the generators that we used for power, and you took the industrial replicators that we were using to build our town, and you took all the medicine that we kind of needed here as much as they need there, and you took the water. What are you doing? But by that point, nobody's paying attention because they're all at Romulus.
Which is hard, too, because, we've seen that the Romulans didn't always want that help, and then you've got these people who do. And this really smacks of, the Maquis. It's like the Federation learned nothing from that. I mean, when you get back to the bureaucracy,
the Federation is not good at learning from its mistakes.
That's true. Yes. So we've got here, with the Fenris Rangers, and I very much kind of commiserate with Seven. I've got that. I don't act on these feelings I have of injustice or anything, but sometimes I wish I could in some ways. But so I kind of envy her for her opportunities here. But we've got this kind of Maquis-like group. But then there's also a lot of the Rangers of the North from Lord of the Rings here too. And just these groups of people that kind of help people that can't help themselves, I guess. And then, so I love that because I just feel like we just didn't get enough of the Fenris Rangers really in Picard, like in the show, to really kind of know exactly what they're about. We knew they were kind of, the good guys, I guess, out on the frontier. But, when Seven gets there, she, like you mentioned before, meets Keon and gets on with him very well from the beginning, and she's so serious with him. He's more funny and metaphorical and uses a lot of idioms and everything that she's got to kind of learn from. And did that just kind of stem from just your writing? You're like, you wanted to play him off, you like have her play off somebody so different from her? Kind of where did that come from?
I mean, obviously, if you're going to have two characters that are going to play off of each other, it helps if they're very, very different. It makes it easy to differentiate their dialogue when you're reading it on the page, even if you're reading quickly. It helps give them distinct voices and personalities, and therefore points of obvious conflict. And part of what I was just doing with Keon Harper is I will often, for a major supporting character, I will pick an actor in my head who, to me, is like the embodiment of that character. If I were going to cast it today and I could pick anybody, I put this person in. Well, for Keon Harper, I was thinking like Jeff Bridges, like he is in The Old Man on FX. But he's got that way. He's got that gravelly presence. It's sort of down to earth. But there's always going to be that hint of the Big Lebowski hiding somewhere behind it. Which is where you get lines like, truth or comfort, kid. You get one. He's like trying to tell us, kid, you're going to get yourself a big chicken dinner. She's like, a what? Bad conduct discharge. He's trying to explain things to her. And then, of course, like the great moment when she's asking, like, what's the name of his ship? What's his ship named after? And he's explaining, best dog I ever had. And she's like, dog? Yeah, dog. Never had a dog, did you? She goes, no. Trust me, someday when you're ready, get a dog and you'll understand. So I'm just picturing, Jeff Bridges, maybe a little Jeff Bridges, maybe a little Sam Shepard somewhere in there, just sort of the funny, gentle, wise old bearded guy, sort of like your Western Ranger almost. Your sort of classic archetype of this weathered, seasoned guy who just dispenses wisdom and weird little idiomatic bon mot. And this is, basically how I picture him. And it made it just very easy to consistently write him, because once I figured that out, I'm like, I just slip into character and I'm like, what would that guy say? And if it doesn't sound like something that would come out of his mouth, I rewrite it. By the same token, for Ellery Cade, I wanted her to feel quirky. I wanted her to feel charming, a little bit funny, but also a little awkward. Like a little sort of a core of insecurity wrapped up, totally wrapped up in competence, intelligence, and charm. And so for her, I pictured Jessica Henwick, who played Colleen Wing in the Iron Fist Marvel TV series. You may have seen her as Bugs in Matrix Resurrections, where she had the blue hair. Jessica Henwick is just one of my favorite actors. I think she's wonderful. So for Seven's love interest, I picture Jessica Henwick as Ellery Cade. And for her mentor, I just had to go with Jeff Bridges for Keon Harper.
The book really seems to be based on this kind of spy element, because you have Seven contacted by someone from Starfleet Intelligence has
Federation Security Agency.
Federation Security, that's right. And it's basically off with a really nice offer, and you realize the offer is not all it seems. How did that turning this, which it looks like it's more about the Rangers, but it's really more about Starfleet's machinations against the Rangers? How did planning that all out go?
Well, not Starfleet's machinations. The Federation Security Agency is a civilian agency. They're like the FBI. They're the Federation's civilian counterintelligence and internal domestic security and interstellar law enforcement bureau. It's a pretty big remit, but that's what they do. They are different from Starfleet Intelligence. Starfleet Intelligence is a military intelligence unit. They serve a very specific function for Starfleet. Civilian intelligence has to be handled by different agencies. Federation Security Agency is your internal agency, much like MI5 in Britain. Beyond this, there's probably also the Federation Intelligence Service, FIS. They're your foreign intelligence agency. They're the CIA of the Federation. And their remit is to only operate outside Federation territory, or if they operate within Federation territory, it has to be under the auspices of a civilian oversight agency such as the FSA. So you got to remember there's different levels of who's in play here. And so we don't have Starfleet as the bad guys. What we have is FSA as this operation that's almost gotten too big for its britches, to the point where it started to lose control of some of its people. You've got rogue operatives who have figured out how to embezzle from the organization, how to steal enough resources to set themselves up in business as black marketeers, arms dealers, power brokers, exactly everything you don't want. Now, how much of this is actually sanctioned by the FSA and is going on as a cover operation, and how much of it is actually this guy going off the reservation? Well, we don't know. The FSA says he's a rogue operative, and we disavow him completely. On the other hand, could he really have embezzled all that money and nobody noticed? Well, that's what they say, but how do you know? And you don't. But when he finally gets busted and taken down, they have no choice but to say, well, he's screwed, he's burned, prosecute him and throw him in a hole. We're done.
The Mardani stuff reminded me of Mission Possible Rogue Nation, when the British are just so terrified of their own threat that they've created.
You got it. There it is. And Rogue Nation was obviously an influence on this. If you ever see my Spotify playlist of inspirational music for the book, the closing suite of music from Rogue Nation is what inspired the finale of the book. Everything from, Foggy Night in London Eat the IMF. That's the climactic action sequence of the book. And also, I think Morocco Chase is from Rogue Nation, and that was the music that for me inspired the first meeting of Keon Harper and Seven, when he basically saves his ass in the alley, and they have to make a high-speed escape under fire. Picture that happening to the music used for the Morocco Chase. And so that was the inspiration there. A lot of music was swirling around in my head as inspiration while I wrote this. But yeah, so I mean, that's what's going on is you've got this, rogue operative. The way that all sort of came about was that originally in the early drafts of the story, we took a more blatantly, it was blatantly a criminal operation or whatever, but the Federation knew about it and was just trying to disavow it. And it was all going to come out and it was going to be this major black eye for the Federation. And Kirsten Beyer, who acts as the liaison between Secret Hideout, which is the TV entity that makes the new shows, and the novelists, all of us over here at the tie-in working for Simon & Schuster. Well, Kirsten, in addition to her role as the co-creator of Star Trek Picard, the TV series, oversees all the tie-ins based on the Secret Hideout shows. So she gets a lot of feedback, and I'm glad she did, because she was able to say, well, that's a step too far. It tarnishes the Federation too much, too early. She says the Mars event hasn't really happened yet. So we're not really ready to see the Federation go down that kind of a heavy-duty corrupt road. We're not really there yet, and it's too soon. So that was why it got pulled back, and layers of ambiguity got sort of attached to that. It's like we're not ready to have that much negativity attached to the Federation, and especially not to Starfleet. It's also why there was originally in the early story outlines a lot more animosity on Seven's part towards Starfleet, and Kirsten asked me to sort of pull that back. And one other thing, one just very simple note that came in from Kirsten after my first outline was that at this point in Seven's life, Seven does not kill anybody. She wanted to make it very clear. Seven cannot take anybody's life through this story. That's not where she is in her emotional development. Icheb has not happened yet. She is not yet on that, that anger, that rage-fueled mission of revenge. That hasn't begun yet. She hasn't been triggered that way. She is still interested in justice. She still believes in what's right. So she's not going to be a killer. She's going to want to be the daughter that Janeway would have wanted her to be. She's going to want to be the person who brings the bad guy to justice, not the one who shoots him in the alley. So I was like, okay, good note. And in fact, because of that note, and you would think, well, it doesn't that put a limitation on you? Actually, it was a great help. There's a big action sequence around the end of Act 2. We're on the Starship Graveyard. The bad guys, Aristu Mardani, also known as Errol Tazgul, he sends these 4 killer drones that are basically like gigantic rhinoceros-sized spiders that have like beam weapon cannons on their back. So they're basically these hunter-killer drones. And you find out they were specifically designed to kill Borg. So they've got like Omicron particle cannons that neutralize nanoprobes. They're fast, they're tough, they're stealthy. They're hunters. They're just brutal machines. I wouldn't have ever come up with that. Originally, the idea was they were going to send down a squad of commandos, and Seven was going to have to fight the commandos. But there was no realistic way to do that fight in that scene and have any of the commandos survive, because it wouldn't have made sense in the story. But then I would have been violating Kirsten's rule about not letting her kill anybody. So I said, how the hell do I get out of this? And that was when I realized, well, you don't let her kill people. You put her up against killer machines that are made to shred her. You basically just put her up against an even more brutal, destructive foe. I was like, oh, that's awesome. Yeah, we're doing that. Once I came up with that, I'm like, this is going to work out really well, because she can destroy all the machinery she wants.
That's always fun. I think one of the things that I loved about the story, too, was the way in which by Seven staying true in many ways to the principles that she was taught by Janeway and the crew of Voyager, are very classic Starfleet's, Federation values.
Mm-hmm.
And, joining the Rangers, she actually creates this opportunity for a new partnership between the Federation and the Rangers.
Yeah.
Because she allows Starfleet and the Federation to see that the Rangers aren't what they thought they were. And to me, that was an incredibly powerful thematic element that by staying true to what we know is true and good and right, we can actually make a difference. And one person in 7 of 9 makes a big difference in this universe that is slowly spiraling to what we're going to get in, the opening of Picard season 1.
Yeah. And plus, she's also able to get past the paranoia on the Rangers' part to get them to take a risk on working with Starfleet. So, yeah, she gets Starfleet to put aside its prejudiced view of what the Rangers are. She gets through the Rangers' paranoia and is able to say, we have some common purpose. And if we work together, there are places Starfleet can't go, things Starfleet can't get to, but we can. We can get them and give them to you, and then you can implement them in ways we can't. You have manpower, you have ships, you have capital ships. There are things you can do with economies of scale that are beyond us, but there are areas of access that we have that you can't possibly get anywhere near. Put us together, we can get some real good work done out here.
Yeah.
That could also be, that could be another book.
Yeah. Which it did feel like yeah, this is such great setup for another book because, like you said, you have this framing device, which kind of creates this stinger where we meet a character we meet in Star Trek Picard season 1, which 7 is actually recruiting to the Fenris Rangers. And so was that a note that you had, or was that always was that character always the person
always
that
there.
7 was?
Yeah,
always done.
I knew that I was going to need a framing sequence that would ground us in Picard that we would recognize, and so I wanted that opening sequence to be there in the bar on Fenris. I'm picturing like a classic Fenris Ranger cop bar. I remembered from the backstory that we were told in season 1 of Picard that the whole thing with Bjayzl happened because Bjayzl came to 7 on Fenris, posing as someone who wanted to become a Fenris Ranger, got 7 talking, and 7 unfortunately let slip information that put a target on Icheb's back. At that point, 7 has become paranoid enough. If you look at the last chapter, when she's talking with Bjayzl, before she even knows Bjayzl's name, she's paranoid enough that she will lie about her own abilities and lie that her own abilities have been suppressed and remain suppressed because of the Omicron particle beam she got hit by on Zira, even though that's not true. She's smart enough and savvy enough to lie about that on her own behalf, but she gets careless and she doesn't remember to cover for Icheb. And when she basically tells, about how Icheb as an emancipated Borg drone has all these great abilities and he's being accepted now into Starfleet in a way that she never could have been, yada, yada, yada. It sounds like she's saying something really nice and great about Starfleet, but what Bjayzl hears is prime target, Icheb. And 7 doesn't realize that's what she's just done. She's protecting herself. She's not keen to the fact that she's failed to protect Icheb. So there's the seed of that. That's the moment of tragedy right there that she's going to look back on. The reader knows it. 7 doesn't. And that's why that moment stings. We're like, oh, no.
Which, it just kind of highlights again how much she still has to learn about humanity, to use a broad term even for, the aliens, but, that she, when she was trying to save the people on, I just lost the name. On Soroya, like she was trying to do good and made a mistake. And here she's trying to throw Bjayzl off the trail inadvertently. She's not in that mind of a villain, I guess, like that.
she's still fallible. She has developed some paranoia. She's not ruthless and paranoid enough. She's not shrewd enough. Even after 5 years as a ranger, there's still, part of her that is not ready to accept that you cannot trust anybody out here. Everybody's working an angle. Everybody's a potential enemy. Everybody's going to potentially stab you in the back. She's not there yet. And sadly, it's not going to happen until she loses Icheb. At that point, she's going to become the dark scourge. She's basically going to become the Batman of the Kira sector, the one who basically will see criminals in every dark corner and will basically commit herself to destroying every goddamn last one of them.
I need a moment then in on television where she's like, because I'm 7.
No, you don't. You really don't. You think you need that. You don't. You want that, but you don't actually need that.
I have a question of production of the book. There are 2 things. One is you have the map, which you didn't see too often in books, but is happening more and more. And here it's a star map. And we also got it with the High Country from John X. Miller. And then also there was the decision to, when you were talking about which series you're pulling from, you mentioned Voyager and Picard, but there's also the discussion of Prodigy, which gets referenced. How are those decisions made? Is that something that the author decides we're going to include that stuff, or does that usually come from the editorial team?
Well, I mean, it was one of those things where as I'm writing the story, because I'd worked on Prodigy, I knew that those events were directly related to the end of Voyager. The Picard continuity had taken into account what had happened in Prodigy because those writers' rooms talk to each other and are coordinated partly by Kirsten Beyer. So I was like, okay, there's no point establishing a new ship or new officers if we already know that Janeway is going to have access to the Dauntless. And the Dauntless gives you Tysus and Essentia and Dr. Noom, all established characters who we know from Prodigy. So they were right there in the outline. I'd planned to use them from the very beginning, which is why if you look at the title page, we credit, not only the creators of Star Trek Picard, but also Star Trek Voyager, because it's heavily based in Voyager. And then we had to credit Prodigy because we're using Dauntless and we're using Prodigy original characters. So we made sure to put them on the title page and give them their due. But that's just one of those things where, I see the connections between all the characters who live in the universe. And it came to me naturally. I'm like, well, if she's going to come to the rescue, she's coming on Dauntless. She's coming in a quick quantum slipstream enabled starship. So that's just how that happened. As far as the star maps, I put those there because John Jackson Miller said, if you've got a hardcover, you might as well push to do some maps in the front. I was like, really? He's like, yeah, it's the only time they'll let you do them. And fans love it. And you can use it as promo and press in the early, build-up. So he says, you should probably do some maps. I said, great. So I did them. Unfortunately, I did not make my instructions as clear as I should have. Right now, when you open it up, it looks like one big map. It's not. It's 2 different maps with different levels of magnification. One sort of showing, the first one on the left shows a closer view of the Kira sector and the systems that are particular within that, and some of the others that are near it, like Utsira, Detroya, etc. The other one is a wider area map that shows the Kira sector as a smaller bit in a wider area to give you the context of where it is in relation to Free Cloud, Zerat, Vol, and a couple of other places. They were supposed to be printed on either side of a single page, so that you would have a right-facing page, and there'd be one map, and you'd turn the side, and there'd be the other. They printed them facing each other, and because of the weirdness of the curve of the Romulan neutral zone, it looks like one map, but it looks like it's been screwed up somehow. Like suddenly the grid lines don't match up, and the Romulan neutral zone takes a weird curve. It's because they were never supposed to be on facing pages. But when I was looking at the page proofs that came in on PDF, I was looking at them one page at a time. I was looking at single page up because I was vetting one page at a time. If I had looked at them 2 pages up in a 2-page view, I would have seen that they put the maps on facing pages and I'd have fixed it. But as it was, I saw them 1 page up, and I thought, first page, second page. Never occurred to me that they put them on facing pages. Never occurred to me. And it's too late to fix. There's no point trying to change it now.
Yeah.
I'm just glad we get them.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
it's like it's.
I had fun. I
it's
made them.
Yeah.
I had fun making them.
Yeah.
That's so cool. That's so cool. What? Okay, this is totally like a geek question for people who love art design. But did you make them in like Photoshop or what program did you? Okay.
What I did is
nice.
I took scans of the original sector grids, whatever, from Star Charts by Jeffrey Mandel. And then I took them into Photoshop, and I used those as a template, the color scan. I put it on a base layer, and I faded it down to about 10 or 20%, just so it'd be like a ghost image. And then I redrew the grid lines. So I redrew the grids. And then I used curved line path tools to rebuild the lines for the neutral zone. I did the same thing for a couple of other curved elements. And then what I did is I made separate layers. I made a layer for just stars, and using various sizes of the hard edge pencil tool for the brush, round, hard edge, no fuzz, no fade or whatever, just nice crisp edges. And then I just figured out like what was the diameter. The really big ones were apparently like a diameter of 43. Most of them were around diameter 27. Some of the really small ones were diameter 15. I figured out you have to use odd numbers, otherwise it doesn't center well. So I just basically then went over and I put new dots over everywhere that he had a dot where I needed to have something. Originally, I tried to replicate like all the elements, but then I realized that made the map too busy. Like originally I had like all the epsilon stations and all that stuff. And eventually I realized, well, I don't need that. I just want to show people in general, in relation to where we know the neutral zone is, and we know this star base and the Azure Nebula, in relation to all of this crap, where is Utsira? Where's Atroya? Where is Soroyo? Where are we going to find that planet? Where is Vol? Where is Free Cloud? Which required some mathematics. I did a whole thread about this on Blue Sky, finding the correct position for Free Cloud. Required a little bit of research, but I just dropped them in. Boom, and then I had a whole separate layer of names of stars, and I had the names for canon stars in one list, and then the new ones that were my creations, that were going to be bolded. I had them in a separate layer, just so I could easily turn layers on and off and see what I was doing. And so I built it all in layers, made sure it was at like 300 ppi, like full size, full page bleed. I think it was a 16-bit grayscale image, and sent that in to the art director and the production department at Simon & Schuster as TIFF files.
See, this is what Star Trek authors are doing for you folks. They're not just creating great works of literature. I
care.
They're creating incredible works of art for you to enjoy the book. So I love it. Like, I think it's so cool that you would put all of that work into, something that, most people are like, oh, cool, a map, and like, there's so much work that goes into this. So, I mean, I know I really appreciate, and I think everybody who reads the books appreciates when we have maps in there, because it really does make a difference. And so, as always, before we let you get out of here, what are the things that we've got? Of course, Firewall, everybody needs to get a chance to get a copy of, but what else are the things that you've got in the fire or that you'd like people to know that you've got coming up? And of course, if they wanted to connect with you, where are the best places to do that?
Well, if you're looking for information about what work I have coming up and what's already out, you can just check my website, davidmack.pro. That's David Mack, MACK.PRO. And there's a section called His Work, and you go in there, and there's books and short fiction, and that's where you'll find most of it. The newest stuff will be right on the front page, so you don't even have to look for it. As far as what I have coming up, over the course of 2024, most of it is going to be short fiction. I don't currently have any novels under contract, so I don't know what the next novel I'm going to write is going to be, or who it's going to be for, or when it will be out. I have an original idea I'm noodling on, but it's not yet ready to go out on submission. I don't know if or when I'll write another Trek book. I'd like to, but the line is, as you've probably noticed, has become truncated somewhat. It is much smaller than it used to be, so it's a little bit harder to get on the schedule than it was in the old days. What I have coming out over the course of the year are 6 pieces of short fiction. 4 of them are going to be in Star Trek Explorer magazine, starting with issue 11, which I believe comes out on April 2. That's going to be a story called Dignified Transfer, set during the Stargazer era. And it's a dramatization of Jean-Luc Picard being tagged for what is known as escort duty, which in the military is what happens when you bring home, you are the officer assigned to escort home the body of a fallen shipmate or officer or whatever. This is him bringing home the body of Jack Crusher to Beverly Crusher and young Wesley, and all the sort of thoughts that go through Picard's mind during the course of the journey. And one of the things thematically that I love about this story, if you don't know what a psychopomp is a mythological figure that escorts the spirits of the dead into the afterlife. And most faiths and most mythologies have some version of it. For instance, there's the Grim Reaper, but in Norse mythology, you have the Valkyries. Well, there's variations on this. And so a lot of the characters and a lot of the ships and planets and things throughout the whole story are named after various psychopomps from different mythology. Wawate, Diana, Vanth. There's basically an officer named Karen Vanth. Karen being, of course, a homonym for Charon. And then you have Vanth, which is another psychopomp in a different religion. So there's all these things. And of course, Picard himself in the story is serving sort of as a designated psychopomp in that he's escorting the body of Jack Crusher home to his final rest. So it's basically there's all this sort of thematic, symbolic stuff. And the reason that story really kind of matters to me is that it's going to be dedicated, and it's going to be in the print edition of the magazine. It's going to be dedicated to my late father-in-law, who died last year. And he was a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, and at one point had been a senior Pentagon officer. So when I attended his funeral last May, it was a big military funeral. And it was just one of those things that just made an incredible impression on me. So when I finally wrote this story, it was important to me that I dedicated it to him. And fortunately, my editor, John Freeman, was amenable to that idea, and he liked the story enough that he put it in the print edition. And then I have, coming out in issues 12, 13, and 14, I've got a TNG movie era story called Memoriam. I've got another one that is sort of timeless. It's a Will Wheaton as Traveler story, Wesley Crusher as Traveler. That's called Family History. And then I have a Picard-based story called Freeblade. And if you've seen Picard, you can probably figure out what that story is. And then I've got 2 original pieces of short fiction coming out in themed anthologies. One is an anthology called Combat Monsters. I don't know what the release date for that is. The premise is World War II, real battles, real engagements, but with the addition of mythological, supernatural, or otherwise some kind of monster, some kind of creature, something to introduce this element of the spectacular. Mine is called Boxcar. Bockskar, which is the name of the aircraft that dropped the second atomic bomb, the one that was dropped on Nagasaki. Let's just say that in the course of a mutiny aboard this aircraft, which was based on all the real officers and real crew of the aircraft, I, of course, find the perfect monster to tie into it and link it all together. And then there's a space western anthology edited by David Boop. It's called Last Train to Kepler 283c. It's coming from Baen Books. It'll be released on November 5, which ominously enough, is also Election Day. So the release date for that anthology may or may not decide the future of democracy in the Western world. But hopefully you can distract yourself by picking up this really cool anthology that will contain my short story, Living by the Sword, which can be non-spoilery described as a young girl who dreams of adventure meets an old female gunfighter who urges her toward a better destiny. And then last but not least is a piece of related work related to Star Trek. There's an academic book coming out from McFarland called Strange Novel Worlds, and it's a series of essays about Star Trek fiction, licensed fiction, fan fiction, different stories. Some of it is by scholars, some of the pieces are by authors. My article is called Official But Not Canon, The Tie-In Writer's Dilemma. And it is about the profession of writing Star Trek tie-in novels from the point of view of someone who has done this professionally for 20 years. And it goes into sort of a discussion of what is the difference between the definitions and meaning between canon, continuity, official, and quality, because these four terms are not synonymous. And so we dive into that. We go into the history of Star Trek franchising and copyrights and this and that and the other thing. And we really sort of dig deep, and we talk about, the issues that brought about the end of the 20-year-long literary experiment that came to an end in Coda back in 2021, and how this was brought about by Picard, etc. That'll be out on April 28th, again, from McFarland Books. It's called Strange Novel Worlds, and it's edited by Caroline Isabel Caron and Kristen Noon.
Man, that's awesome. And that one specifically just sounds incredibly fascinating for everybody who enjoyed the Lit Verse for so long. And so I was writing that down. I'm like,
it's a weird thing
to read that one.
I've never actually had to write an academic paper before with citations. I've never had to do like an actual research paper about Star Trek before. So
that's awesome.
So it's written like an academic essay.
When I was in college, I asked if I could write an essay or two on tie-in fiction because that was something I was reading a lot and wanted to write about. And it was so hard to find academic essays on tie-in fiction, and also even more hard to find actual books on the subject. And since I've left college in the last 2 or 3 years, we've had a ton of books on tie-in fiction come out. So that's really nice that we're finally starting to see that literature come out that can help us be able to write academic stuff on it.
Cool.
That's awesome. Well, David, I love, one, that you've got so much coming out for people to check out. And of course, I think we all hope and pray that you're going to be having more Star Trek books come out, because you really do. You never disappoint. And thank you so much, as always, for giving us your time. It means a lot to us here at Literary Treks. Guys, go get Star Trek Picard, Firewall.
Thanks, man.
Well, guys, that was a really great interview. I love having the authors on the show, especially all of them. But, when, somebody like David comes on and has so much to say about the book, it kind of makes our jobs very easy. And, we get so much insight into it. And yeah, I can't wait for more from him too, just getting off of this book. And, I want more. I want to know what happens to Ellery. I want to know what happens with other characters here. So hopefully there's more in the future.
And I think that he did a good job of leaving open potential for the future. He didn't fill in all of Seven's time through the whole time that she was in the Fenris Rangers. You only get a sliver of it. So that's maybe another Picard novel down the line. Maybe we'll bring in other authors. Maybe Kirsten or someone else will eventually one day come back. So I'm also hoping.
Just need to buy lots of copies of the book so that Simon & Schuster know to keep making them.
Yep.
I would love, I think you mentioned something there, Jonathan, that I would love to see. And that's absolutely to have Kirsten come back and do, novels in this era. And I know she's super busy, and I don't think that's ever really going to happen.
Yeah.
But I think it would be phenomenal just because, of course, she has so much to do with this series, and specifically these Voyager characters. I mean, nobody wrote those characters better than her. And nobody, made me love the series of Voyager like she did. So yeah, it's disappointing that, unfortunately, I don't know if that'll ever happen, but this was so much fun. I'm so glad that David got a chance to join us. Of course, if you would like to contact us or get in touch with us, you can find us wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, we're on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, all at Trek FM. You can also find us online at Trek.fm. You could join us on Patreon at patreon.com/TrekFM and make sure all of the shows keep coming to you each and every week with our associate producers here, Casey Pettit, as well as Greg Rosier. We really appreciate that because that means that we can keep all of this content coming to you each and every week. But, gentlemen, if people wanted to catch up with you and see what you've got going on outside of Literary Treks, where can they find you?
Well, you can find me pretty much anywhere-ish on Goodreads, Letterboxd, Twitter, and Instagram at Knitting Trekkie. You can also find me poking around in the Babel Conference on Facebook from time to time. And you can also follow along with my reading journey on my new blog called bookbusterreviews.com. And it's not anything in particular. I do like books that have been adapted into film, hence the name Bookbuster. But pretty much anything I'm reading, it's my own little way to kind of keep myself honest with what I'm reviewing and actually writing full reviews. So check me out there. And how about you, Jonathan?
And you can find me, my main hub is YouTube. I have my YouTube channel where I talk all things books, Star Trek, Star Wars, and otherwise. And that's just my name, Jonathan Cohn, last name Koan. And then you can also find my Twitter account, at Jonathan Cohn, where I talk about mostly book stuff, but also some film and TV stuff. And then, of course, I'm on Goodreads, and my Goodreads user is Jonathan Cohn.
And you can find me all over social media under the name Matt Rushing02. Of course, you can also find me on the 602 Club, which we're talking about all of those franchises we love outside of Star Trek. You can also find me doing Warp 5, The Orb, The Artificial Tango, and Saddle Up. But thank you so much for joining us. And until next time, live long
and read on.
What do you call that, light reading? To each his own, number one.